Speaker Boehner appointed this task force because he's very concerned about the seriousness of the cyber threat facing the United States, because of the trend of that threat, and because of the difficulties that both branches of government have in dealing with something that is so complex and cross-jurisdictional. So our charge was to develop recommendations that provide a framework within which the appropriate House committees can then take action. On Monday, we delivered our recommendations to the Speaker and the Majority Leader, and today we're delivering them to y'all. We were not asked to be another commission studying cybersecurity. We were not asked to come up with legislation that's a comprehensive bill to answer all of the problems that get labeled as cyber. What we were asked to do is get input from 9 different committees of jurisdiction, and with that input, develop an outline of action that the House could take this Congress that would make a real difference in the area of cybersecurity. And I think we have accomplished that. Each of the 9 most relevant committees have appointed representatives to the task force. The Speaker also appointed 3 additional members who are also on the relevant committees. And with the work and the insights and experience of the folks on this task force, as well as the personal and committee staffs that supported us, I think we have fulfilled our mission. Generally, we believe that Congress ought to promote a series of incentives to help raise the level of cybersecurity generally. We think that we have got to update laws, a variety of laws, especially those that prevent information sharing and taking action on that information, and that generally we've got to put a greater priority on cybersecurity in everything from grant funding to federal procurement. So my colleagues are going to flesh out some of the details of those recommendations, but let me just add one last point. There are a lot of reasons that we need to take action in cybersecurity. One of them is that every single day, intellectual property, whether it's blueprints or formulas or business plans, are stolen from businesses in the United States of all sizes. And when intellectual property is stolen, jobs are stolen from the United States. We need to take action for our national security, but also for our economic security. And if we can enact these recommendations, I think the country will be more secure on both fronts. So I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves. We'll turn first to Mr. Adderholt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Robert Adderholt, Congressman from the 4th District of Alabama, representing the Appropriations Committee on the task force. First, I'd like to thank my colleague, Mr. Thornberry, for his work and leadership with this task force and all the work that's been done and his leadership that he has provided over the last several weeks. There is no doubt, and I don't think anyone would question, that cybersecurity poses one of the most economic and national security challenges to our nation that we currently are facing. Electronic threats continue to grow in our nation. They change, they evolve, so we must have the defense that's available to try to combat them. This country is also facing unprecedented physical situation that requires careful consideration of any action that we take to make sure that we get a dollar's worth of solution for every dollar that we spend. Now more than ever, it's crucial that every dollar that we do spend equals security realized, and I believe the policy recommendations that this task force put forward will accomplish that. My home state of Alabama, we have a lot of defense and security organizations that are located there, and they have cybersecurity efforts, or have made cybersecurity efforts a priority in their research and their strategic development initiatives. With this work that this task force has put together over the past several weeks and that has just been presented, I am able to go home and to announce that we have comprehensive policy strategy put together to match the work that has already been done toward meeting that goal. I want to thank each of my colleagues that had a part in this task force. Each of them, of course, on a volunteer basis. We all took time out of our schedule to try to attend the meetings, try to come up with solutions, and I want to thank each of them for their hard work, but of course thank the chairman and his staff for their diligence as we work through this, and we look forward to working with you and with each other as we move this process forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jason Chaffetz from Utah's 3rd Congressional District. I'm on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee as their representative, this group. I commend Speaker Boehner and for having the foresight at the very beginning to start and prioritize this. Our nation is under attack. It's attacked in the intelligence community. It's under attack in the Department of Defense, and everything from our critical infrastructure to our financial institutions. Technology is our friend. It's here to stay. It's going to continue to grow, but we need to also make sure that we're vigilant in protecting ourselves against those who would do us harm. A lot of these threats are coming from overseas. I think there is a proper role of government to play here. We've got to make sure we don't overstep our bounds, but work in partnership with particularly the business community and everything from families to the businesses of this country, because the threat is real. It is happening as we speak, and we need to continue to be vigilant. So I appreciate the great staff work that has happened along the way. I appreciate Mr. Thornberry and his leadership, and look forward to continuing to work on this issue, because it isn't going away. Thank you.
I served on the committee as a representative from the House Armed Services Committee, and so my focus was on defense. As a combat veteran, I can't think of anything more important than addressing the growing threat and the growing vulnerabilities of our U.S. defense networks in terms of promoting cybersecurity. And so I just think that it's important. I think that the recommendations from this task force will go a long way, if implemented, to securing this country's, to securing the United States from the standpoint of both economic and national security.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Goodlatte, member of Congress from Virginia, and I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and that is the role that I was asked to fulfill by the Speaker. I want to thank the Speaker for establishing this task force, and Chairman Mac Thornberry for his very, very hard work in getting us to this point. Cybersecurity is a national security issue and an economic security issue. The need to update the criminal code to reflect the seriousness and evolutionary nature of these crimes is self-evident, and this could include applying the RICO statute to certain cyber crimes. We need to increase the tools available to law enforcement in order to investigate, apprehend, and prosecute cyber criminals without compromising legitimate privacy and other constitutional concerns. Industry should not be burdened with additional regulations that would place U.S. companies at a competitive disadvantage. Simple, universally accepted, and flexible standards should be recommended to industry for securing their cyber portfolio, and incentives such as liability protection should be given to the companies that take the necessary steps to secure their networks. Thanks.
I'm Bob Latta from Ohio's 5th Congressional District, one of the members from the Energy and Commerce Committee on the task force. And I too want to thank Mac for the great job that you did. You know, a lot of times you get assigned to ad hoc committees, and you wonder sometimes if we're really going to get something accomplished. And I'm telling you, this Mac kept the people focused, kept everybody working, kept the meetings going, and I just want to tell him what a great job that he did. You know, just to echo a little bit about where I'm from. I represent right now, it depends on the day, either the largest number of manufacturing jobs in the state of Ohio or the second largest in my district. And a lot of folks out there, you know, they're trying to run their businesses, but they never think about some of these other issues like cybersecurity. It's just interesting enough. I got home during the last work period, and the NFIB on page 6 has talking about cyber attacks and what local businesses need to be doing, small businesses, to protect themselves. Because it's already been reiterated by some of my colleagues, and it's very, very important that businesses out there understand the threats that they're under. When I sat through these, you also see it on the national defense side, but they both come together that, as always been said, we lose a lot of jobs when our technology goes overseas. When Americans work very, very hard to develop it right here, and at the flick of the switch, in a second, it's gone. And within months, somebody else has got your technology and producing it overseas. So it's very important that folks take this seriously. And I'm very, very glad that the Speaker put this task force together. And again, I want to thank Mac for the great job that he did.
My name is Dan Lundgren. I'm the representative from the Homeland Security Committee. I represent 3rd Congressional District in California. Look, the world of cyber and cyber warfare is here. So we better make sure that cybersecurity is at the top of our priority list. That is one of the reasons, if not the prime reason, why the Speaker assembled this task force under Mac's leadership. Sometimes when you have a task force or a group like this coming together from different committees, what you get is a lowest common denominator result. I think if you examine this report, you'll see that's not the case. One of the great things about this task force was, frankly, this was the first time that those of us from different committees that have a bit of the jurisdiction over this subject matter have ever gotten together and talked about it as a group or as a team. I think that helps break down some of the jurisdictional barriers. I think that will help us advance this agenda as we go forward. It's extremely important. We need to have a sense of urgency, both in the Congress, in the other elements of government, and in the public at large, because this is an urgent question that has to be addressed now, not later. It has been a privilege to work with my colleagues on this. After you look at the entire task force report, one thing among others stands out, at least to me, and that is the consensus is that 85% of those intrusions into our cyber world could be stopped if we had good computer hygiene. That appears to be the consensus of people in both private and public presentations to us. If that's the case, that's the low-hanging fruit that we have an obligation to go after immediately. There are no excuses for us not to do so. We can be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, not only in advancing legislation, but in doing a better job as members of Congress to bring this message home to our districts. And I think you will see that members of the task force will be rallying our colleagues to do this. Once again, it's a privilege working with my colleagues, and particular a privilege to be working under the leadership of Mac Thornberry in this effort.
All right. Well, McCall's next. I got my alphabet wrong. You ready here now?
Just in time.
You walked in just in time. Didn't think you were going to be here, so you're going now.
Sorry. I'm in the middle of a markup on foreign affairs, so I apologize. Michael McCall from Texas. I chair the Cybersecurity Caucus and chaired the CSIS Commission on Cybersecurity, made recommendations to the President. Let me first thank Mac, my good friend, and the staff for your tremendous work on this project. And it's a great work product. It provides, as Mac said, an outline of where we need to go forward. Admiral Mullen said this is one of the greatest threats that we face. And we've talked a lot about the threats, but the threat to our national security, hacking into our federal networks, the threat to our economic security, with all the intellectual property being stolen every day, it's very difficult to compete globally when your innovation's being stolen. And some of these countries have a motto, why invent when you can steal it? And we need to stop that. The one piece I wanted to talk about, I'm on Science, Space, and Technology, also on the Homeland Security Committee, on the Cybersecurity Subcommittee that Mr. Lundgren chairs. And we did pass out of the Science and Technology Committee a bill that does several things that are outlined in the report. At first, and it passed unanimously, which I thought was a great thing. I think this issue should not be a partisan issue. It's too important to the country. And we need to work together in a bipartisan way to get this agenda through the Congress. And I think doing this by the committees of jurisdiction in an orderly fashion is a way to do it, rather than some comprehensive bill, sort of take it or leave it style. But it does several things. It does harden the federal networks by providing NIST standards across the federal networks. It provides a private sector plug-in to NIST to look at voluntary standards and guidelines. I think NIST is the preferred choice, I think, for the private sector to work with in the federal government. It also has an education and awareness piece. I wasn't here, Dan, for your presentation. I'm sure you talked about hygiene and education awareness, and this is going to be a big issue moving forward that we need to do, and it's provided in that legislation as well. Also, federal procurement standards. If we can set a certain standard with respect to what the federal government's buying and procuring, that could set standards across the industry and the private sector as well. It provides for a cyber workforce through a scholarship program, and then finally it establishes a university and private sector task force to make recommendations on research and development. So, and again, it passed unanimously. I think this is a kind of legislation we ought to be looking at moving forward. And I'm proud to be a part of the team, Mac. You did a great job herding all the cats in our competing busy schedules. But this, I believe that what we have achieved and what we're putting forward is going to make the nation safer, and it's going to protect our private sector. Thank you.
Now, Mike. Thanks, Mac. Hi, I'm Tim Murphy from the 18th District around Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Here's representative of the Energy and Commerce Committee. When I first became part of this committee, and I have to congratulate and really thank Chairman Thornberry for doing a great job in bringing people together of different interests, I used the acronym RADAR as my sense of evaluating how things are. And the R stands for risk assessment. Every factory, every power plant, every company involved in interstate and intrastate commerce needs to be able to do a risk assessment of where they stand. Second thing, the A stands for alert. Do they have a system within their, whatever they have, to alert them that there is a threat or looming or active cyber attack? Next is D for defense. Do people have a mechanism in the finance sector, in the transportation sector, in defense, interstate commerce, and energy? Do they have a mechanism to defend themselves against this? The next one is A for attack. In other words, counterattack. You cannot just be passive and continue to put up barriers and expect that to be enough. And the final R is recovery. And do people have things in place for that? And I've got to say, as I went through this and hearing about things taking place, whether it's universities in China or state-sponsored activity or people probing for possible terrorist activity or even people just probing and pranking, it is a very serious situation in America. It is not inconceivable that we could be attacked in a way that doesn't involve ever firing a bullet or flying a plane into a building. And it is substantial what it could do to our economy. So we have put together a list here, and many of them are voluntary, but I certainly would recommend this to America's commerce and energy sector, and food and drug and medical sectors. Take this seriously. Whether or not Congress mandates this, it must be done. You cannot underestimate the threats before us. The more we use computers to store and process information, the more we use computers to operate our factories and our energy grid, the more we have to pay attention to the risk. It is as if you open a bank and have all the doors and windows unlocked because people can come in and out and do things. So while we have done some of our work, Congress must continue, but American people must do their part too. Protecting the place they work, protecting their computers, and leaders in all these sectors of American business must also do this. We cannot emphasize that enough. It is extremely important every day to be on the alert. So this committee's work, although in part is done with this step, we recognize that the work of many committees in Congress, in the House and in the Senate, is not done. We have a long way to go, because as far as we're advancing, we still have people out there who are still trying to invade and overcome whatever we put up and interfere with our commerce, and we cannot let that happen. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Stivers. I represent Ohio's 15th District in the center of Ohio, around Columbus, Ohio, and I'm on the Financial Services Committee. I want to thank Speaker Boehner and Chairman Thornberry for allowing me to serve on the task force, and appreciate the work of many of you in this room and many folks both in the government and outside the government that helped us put together some solid recommendations. I think this report creates a real integrated framework of real collaboration among the committees that recognizes that not only is our financial and economic security at risk, but our national security is at risk from cyber attack. And we need to make sure we have an integrated approach to confronting that. I think we've done that here. I do want to recognize that some of the incentives that we recognize to try to get the private sector to have best practices, I think will work very well. I also think we've done a good job of making sure the federal government needs to lead by example and do its job. And finally, I think some of the things that we've put in the recommendations to encourage the development of cyber security insurance, I think will help secure things going forward. I think defining the liability will help develop a market for cyber insurance that will help ensure that there is real protection going forward. I appreciate the opportunity to serve on the task force and look forward to working to implement the recommendations. Thank you.
In conclusion, I'm Lee Terry from Omaha, Nebraska, home of Stratcom. It is the overseer of all of our cyber issues within the military, as well as University of Nebraska Omaha IS&T Information Assurance Program, one of the tops in the nation. So I am one of the energy and commerce, but I'm kind of a at-large player here because of the experiences. Two themes or principles of which this plan is based upon. One is flexibility. I think all of us, because of our cyber experience, we were chosen by the Speaker, but we knew coming in you couldn't tie yourselves to a technology because then it's too easy to get around and the people you're trying to protect are then prevented from that. So it had to be flexible. It had to be able to meet the immediate current needs of those that needed protection most, which we identified as critical infrastructure. So two ultimate themes is it's broken up into the critical infrastructure and non-critical. Critical is, of course, an immediate attack will result in death and significant disturbance or significant disturbance to our economy. And that's going to be one group. The other group will be the non-critical, which will have different standards because of meeting their individual needs. Now, one theme, whether you're in the critical infrastructure or non-critical infrastructure, one of the main principles of this plan is communication. When we met with the industry folks as well as the tech folks, the ability to communicate with each other was a theme we heard from almost every one of our presenters and witnesses. When I've talked to energy companies, they said, if we could only talk to each other about our best practices without fear of breaking federal law, or actually receive, if we're a critical infrastructure, information from NSA or other military of which it would be classified so they aren't getting those type of informations. Communications is key. So when you look through this, look through the two basic themes that run all the way through this, and this is ability to communicate and flexibility.
I appreciate everybody. Questions? Sir? Sure. And you hit on two elements. One is there is already well-established precedent and law where the Department of Defense comes up to help in time of disaster. Obviously, hurricanes and earthquakes, natural disasters come to mind. One of the questions we've asked in some of my subcommittee hearings is how does that relate to cyber? And it's not very clear at all how it relates to cyber. So one of our recommendations is that that relationship of the Department of Defense support to civilian authorities, when asked to provide expertise, needs to be made more specific. But I think that even the bigger issue is this, and Lee was just hitting on it. Everybody says that sharing of information is critical. Right now, the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies have a very hard time sharing information, and companies have a hard time sharing information with each other. And so one of the elements of our recommendation is to modify the laws in a narrow way to allow that information to be shared. Now, you got to protect, you know, your classified information, and there's a number of considerations there, but it is just essential that we not leave DOD's assets on the sidelines, and I'm talking particularly about the information that DOD and the intelligence community bring. We've got to get that involved in the game. So that's what we recommend happens. Well, I think there are a number of areas we agree with the White House proposal. I brought my copy, by the way. So, for example, where they talk about updating law enforcement, which I think Bob talked about, data breach law, FISMA reform, personnel authorities, each of those are sections of the White House proposal, and I think those are largely in support of what we recommend as well. Now, there's some differences. The White House proposal is more regulatory than we believe is wise, but as I think Mike mentioned, there's a lot of room to work together here within Congress, Republicans and Democrats, and with the White House, and it is essential that we do so because of the economic aspect and the national security aspect. So in the report we make some specific mentions, but I think there's a lot of room to work together. Yeah. In the White House proposal, they suggest that the Department of Homeland Security have increased personnel authorities for pay and benefits to get highly specialized people, similar to that which exists in other departments. And we make mention of that in our report that, you know, if you're going to get some of these high-dollar smart computer people, they might not want to be a GS6. And so you have to have some increased flexibility in order to take advantage of that. So, yeah, and then I'll come back. There are several aspects to reporting when something happens, but one of them is that just like companies have to file reports on potential liabilities of various kinds, perhaps cyber ought to be included among those potential liabilities if they've been hacked into, for example. But you have to weigh the costs and the benefits of some sort of mandatory disclosure. And I think one of the themes you see through here is that you've got to have that kind of cost-benefit analysis, not just the heavy hand of government. You've got to figure out whether it's really going to make things better, whether you're going to have people more likely to take action, or whether you're going to encourage people to cover things up. And so that's part of that analysis, but it's certainly part of what we think needs to be looked at.
We discussed it many times at length.
Yeah.
It's a difficult liability.
Yeah. As far as first question, when's the Speaker going to, or what's the next step? Basically, I think that's in his ballpark. As I mentioned, we just delivered the recommendations to him. The statement that he has with our report is that he's generally pleased, and now next step is for the committees to go about fleshing out their portion of the recommendations that are here. Secondly, on money, yeah, I'm worried about the effect that the whole budget situation could have on national security of all kinds, including cyber security. And one of the things that we were very conscious of, particularly having an appropriator with us, is, okay, you got recommendations, how are you going to pay for it? And so I think that overlay of our fiscal reality was a thread that all of us were very conscious of as we tried to figure out what to do to make sense. The Speaker felt that we needed to start by getting our own act together, basically. 9 different committees have some jurisdiction here, and his view was, rather than try to coordinate all this in the Speaker's office or some other approach, that have each of those 9 committees appoint a representative and see what makes sense that we can, again, accomplish this year that will make a difference. But all along, we recognize that the majority in the House can't do this alone. We have been, since I've been here, working with Democrats on this issue. Michael mentioned some of that. We have been, kind of keeping the Senate updated on what we're doing. Certainly the White House. It's going to take everybody working together to get it done. And I think that hopefully this advances that process. So, yes. It is not included in here to have a cyber czar, if you will. We do make mention that we believe the Department of Homeland Security its role in coordinating the defense of the .gov sector should be formalized. But we did not go as far as some people would to create some new entity to do that. And I don't know, everybody here probably has different opinions on that, but again, what we try to do is take 9 different committees, bring it all together. What can we agree on that we can pass this year that will make a real difference to the country? That was our focus. And so those are the things that you have in the report. Well, as I think Lee referenced, there are some portions of critical infrastructure that are already pretty heavily regulated. They have to ask Mother May I from their regulator before they can do things. And I think our view is that those regulators ought to include cybersecurity in the concerns, the regulations that it implements anyway. Now, whether you have kind of a separate channel of regulations through the Department of Homeland Security or somebody else that all critical infrastructure has to go through, I think would be somewhat of a difference we have with the administration. But remember this, 85–90% of all the infrastructure we're talking about is owned by the private sector. And as somebody mentioned, I forget who, flexibility, government regulate, think how long it takes to write a government regulation, and think how fast things move in cyberspace. There's a disconnect there. And so what we want to do is elevate cybersecurity generally, put it higher on the radar screen for everybody's consideration. But we just do not believe that government can say, you go do this in a comprehensive way, because it just moves too fast from that. So, I mean, if somebody else wants to, yeah. I suspect everybody here has been working with our counterparts in some way or another. So, you know, I've certainly shared a copy with Jim Langevin, with whom I work as ranking member on the Armed Services Subcommittee. We're on the Intelligence Committee together, again, but that was. We expect there to be no problem at all in working together. That doesn't mean everybody's going to agree on everything, but the point is we ought to work together on the ideas and not get into a partisan standoff, and I just don't think we will, because it has never happened with this issue. So, sure. Well, I think if you look at the first section where we suggest a menu of voluntary incentives, it is to adjust somewhat that cost concern that businesses have. And not every sort of incentive will work for every business, but that is the purpose. Trying to have that menu of incentives, and it's a variety of things from well, you can see from tax incentives to liability protection that could help encourage business generally to elevate their cybersecurity preparedness, and so it tries to deal with exactly that. As somebody mentioned, or as Dan mentioned, if you can get 85% improve, of the malicious attacks by good hygiene, you ought to encourage, good hygiene. And then there are more sophisticated threats, of course, which we also try to deal with. So, okay. Nope, they're done. Thank y'all.